Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
I want to take a moment. Bruce alluded to what went on in Charlottesville this weekend, Virginia, and things like that just breaks your heart. But I'm going to tell you something, that any movement of people that does not end at the cross, at the feet of Christ, is destined at some point to fail and go adrift. And there is no place for hatred. There's no place for dominance among or I'm better than, or ridiculous stuff like that. We are all sinners in desperate, desperate need of a Savior to save us, and we do, and that's Jesus. And when we're going to talk, there's no institution, I feel like, more movement, institution in our country that is probably under more attack and in more danger of failure right now in many ways than the institution of marriage. And I think, and the thing about it is this is something that we place so much weight on in our lives, in our society, in our culture. Tell me the truth. Okay, ladies, just show of hands. When you were little, how many of you, at some time in your life, before you were married, and you're not married, you're still thinking, you had actually planned out parts of your wedding and had thought of your children's names that you didn't have, and thought about the perfect man that you were going to marry, and the perfect house you were going to have, and the perfect place you were going to be, and the perfect, all of these things perfect, was going to have and was going to happen, okay? All right. Now, guys, sometimes we think about it a little bit different. Sometimes we think about that, but also we think about something different. Guys, sometimes we're thinking, okay, how can we have legal sex 2 times a day? If you raise your hand, if you're still waiting for both of those things, raise your hand. I'm just kidding. All right. I'm kidding. But here's the thing. Marriages really are under attack. We put so much weight on these things. But there's a study nationally that gets quoted all the time. There's a statistic. It says that 50% of marriages end in divorce. And that's a cute subject. I'm going to be honest with you. I've never found a credible study that shows that to be accurate. But it's quoted all the time. And here's the thing. If marriages are so important, I think you would agree with these 2 statements, regardless of that stat or another. One, that if you get married, that will be probably the singular, most impactful human relationship that you ever have. Whether it lasts or whether it fails, it will be a huge thing for you. I think we can agree with that. I think the second thing that we can agree with is that no one enters marriage saying, boy, I hope this fails. I hope this just crashes and burns and we're just in counseling for years after this is over. I think nobody ever enters with that. So if you're talking about the most impactful relationship that you will have if you're married, if you're single and you stay single the rest of your life, there will be gigantic relationships. That doesn't minimize what's going on in your life. But what it's saying is look, if this is a really, really, really big deal and everybody wants it to win, would you not say that I would prepare for that? Look, if there was a 50% chance if you walked out of this building today that you're going to get attacked by an alligator waiting outside the door, you would make some changes in your life, right? I'd send Rich Hayes out first and then I'd run. That's what I do. No, I love you, brother. No, just kidding, man. But you would make some differences in your life. And here's something I want to say about this series, okay? Look, I'm not foolish, okay? I know we are all in here and we have regrets in our past, okay? There's things that we could have done better, we should have done better. Some of us have had marriages that have failed and we've retried and it's been difficult. Here's what I'm going to tell you. This is not a series about back then. This is a series about what's coming, okay? Can we just draw a line in the timeline of our lives right now and say that all we're going to talk about right now, we're going to look back and go, boy, I sucked at that. We're not going to do that. We're going to look at what the things we say across this series. We're going to start right here, and we're going to say, going forward, I will do. A lot of times I tell my kids, kids get in a fuss or something like that, or they did something that's wrong, and you'll hear, I'll come up to them and I'll say, look, And I'll start telling them this is what I would like to see. And they go, wait a minute, I didn't do that. I said, I don't care. I said, I don't really assign and blame to anybody right here. I'm just saying from here on out, this is what I want to see. So let's do that. Let's give ourselves a pass on our past, okay? And let's start from here and say what we're going to do differently in how we live. You know, what we're going to talk about, this series really has its germination in a book by Jimmy Evans. It's called Marriage on the Rock. And he talks about some vows, and I've changed some things and moved some stuff around. But so if you want to read that book, it's a great book to read. You know, if you want to talk about marriage or you're going to get married. But here's some things, too, about this. This is not a series just about marriage. This is a series about some principles that need to be applied in your life in many veins and many areas. We're going to be talking to single people through this. There will be talking to people who are divorced, people who are widowed, people who are married, people who are thinking they're going to get married, you know, who are close to it and got somebody. Some people who are thinking that one day they might, hopefully, one day, someday. There are things in this series for you, so do not tune out throughout this. And I tell you, invite your friends to this because this could make a difference for generations in their lives. We're going to be talking about several vows. You know, we talk about the wedding vows. We see those. Those are big deals. A lot of times we write them to be flowery and pretty. And then, you know, 3 years in, you're going, why did I ever say that? You know, I mean, you're thinking that's nuts. You know, I didn't have any idea that this was going to be, you know, when she's throwing up, I had no idea that's what health meant. Okay, what do I do with that? You know, I remember the first time that my child, you know, projectile vomited. Oh my gosh. I went flashbacks to the Exorcist and, you know, and Linda Blair, you know, and all that type of stuff. I had no idea. But I'm going to give you some vows that if you will put these into practice in your life, these will make a difference. We're going to talk about several things. Next, we're going to talk about the vow of pursuit, about what it means to leave and be united with your wife, with your spouse, and what it means to pursue a great relationship, what it means to do that. And we're going to be looking in a couple weeks about the vow of partnership. We're going to be talking about some hinky stuff. So that's going to be crazy, but you be here for that. But today we're going to talk about the vow of priority. The vow of priority. You know, the problem is in our lives is we've been inundated with this thing about marriage. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I think this is if I can only find the one, right? You know, my soulmate. Have you ever heard that phrase before? My soulmate. Someone special who makes all love songs make sense, you know, who makes flowers have color. Their smell just invigorates me and makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It's just unbelievable. And we're just inundated with it. I remember being in my 20s and I'm single and I don't care. And my wife can tell you, I had this thing mentally. I mean, it's just people would say wedding. I would mean wedding and I would say funeral. And it wasn't a joke. It would just slip up. I'd go, hey, I'm going to a funeral. I mean, a wedding this weekend. I can't tell you how many times I said that. You know, and I was not for the marriage thing. I didn't want to do that. I'm in my 20s, and how many times, if you've been in your 20s, if you're single, do people look at you and go, hey, when are you going to get married? Do you have a special someone? We create this incredible value on marriage like it's the be-all, end-all of everything to do with life. And we almost create, and in the church we'll do it too. It's almost like we create this situation where, you know, one day when you're like a real adult, not just junior, second class, you'll be married. And that's nuts. You know, Paul even says, look, if you're not called to marriage, it's even better that you don't, because you can serve God with so much more if you don't get married. You know, and it's important. I don't want to devalue it, but I feel like sometimes we create this situation where if you don't get married, then you're not, and we push people toward this relationship, you know, almost blindly, like, you know, I've got to get there. You know, it's almost like being married is no more the fulfillment of you being a human than being a preacher is the fulfillment of you being a Christian. Okay, it's just a call. It's just something that God puts in your life. It's wonderful, and it doesn't lessen the amount of joy or amazement that you will have in your life if you're single or if you're married. It won't do that. The problem is that we create this situation where it's got to be, I got to find the one. I got to find the one. There's my soulmates out there, my perfect person. That they're going to be my date at New Year's Eve. I can rest in that. And here's the thing that I would like for you to leave today. I would like to change that. I would like for you, if you're single looking for the one, if you're married and you found the one, I would like for you to change that. I am looking for the two and not the one. And here's why. Because in your life, and here's the truth, in the life of every human being, God is meant to be the one. My spouse is meant to be the two. God is meant to be the one. My spouse is meant to be the two. The title of one was never meant to be applied to a human being in your life. Never meant to be applied with that. You know, Jesus talked about it in a verse that you really don't think about. It's in Matthew 22. In verse 36, it said, they asked, teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? And Jesus replied, you must love your spouse with all your, no, he didn't say that. You must love yourself. No, he didn't say love yourself. He said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Priority number one, love God with everything you have. Number one. And then he said this in verse 39. He said, and a second is equally important, love your neighbor as yourself. So you see the priority. Love God first, love people second. Now here's the thing, it's something very important. It says the second is equally important. Well, Jim, how can the first one be the greatest and the second one be equally important? How can they be in order of that way? Because here's the thing, you can't love people adequately until you love God fully. You understand this? You're not going to love them correctly until you love God fully, because you're going to be kind of wandering around about who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be, and you'll get wacky definitions of love that like you just enable people and celebrate them as they go to their demise and all kinds of things. You'll have all kinds of stuff going on in your life, and you won't really understand what God defined love to be. But until you understand what God's defining love to be, and you judge love by God's definition, you're not going to love people to the fullest and that you need, and you'll be damaged yourself, you'll damage others as well. So it starts with love God first, love people second, and that needs to play out most of all in relationships, when our marriages and our dating relationships, all this, mainly marriages, you need to start with loving God first and then loving people second, although it is equally important. Here's something, I want to talk to folks who are single. This is something this is a vow that I want you to, I'm going to talk about some vows. Here's a vow I have for you. Here's a vow I want you to think about. I will seek the one while preparing for my two. Don't you say that with me. I will seek the one while preparing for my two. Okay? And I'm gonna go even a little bit further with that. I will seek the one more than I seek the two. Because that's the most important thing. You're not ready for the two until you're seeking the one. And even beyond that, I will seek the one regardless of the existence of the two. I will seek the one is the most important thing you can do. There was a pastor I heard preaching on marriage one time and relationships. He was preaching just dating, relationships, and things like that. And what he said, I've been kind of out of the game for a little while, so I'm going to get like a focus group of single people together, and he got a good group and said, let's just talk about what it's like to be single right now. And one of the stories he came from his name was Andy Stanley. One of the stories that he came from that focus group I thought was really pertinent. It's just a real deal. And the girl allowed him to share this. She said that, she had met Christ and been in church and all that type of stuff, in high school, but got to college and kind of let it go. And kind of wandered off into what she was doing and all kind of party stuff. Anything that was going on, she kind of rationalized it. And you know how it is. I've been there. Because similar to my story. You're going into college, you start wandering around and you're doing all this stuff and kind of gotten far away from God. But she met this dude in one of her classes. And she was like, he's a really good looking guy. Okay, that's great. He's great. Talking to him throughout the day, and stuff. He loves Jesus. He really does. You can see it. And those people, when they really love Jesus and they're not just throwing out John 3:16 and every verse that, they've half quoted, to try to make you feel something, but they really love Jesus. And he is pursuing the Lord. And he's like, this is a guy, this is a keeper, type of thing. She goes and she calls her mom. And she said, Mom, because, it gets serious when you call Mom, right? It gets serious anytime you call Mom. Come on, Mom, look, I've met this guy, and he's great, and you're going to like him. He's a Christian. I think this could be a guy for me. He's great looking. He's a good guy. He loves Jesus. He pursues Christ. That's the most important thing for him in his life. I can tell it. And she said that her mom said something to her that changed everything for her. And she said it very gently and with love. It was not condemnation. She said, sweetie, I love you. But if he loves Jesus like you say he loves Jesus, and if he is following after Jesus the way you say he is following after Jesus, he's not looking for a girl like you right now. Now that's harsh, but I'm going to be very honest with you. That's the truth. If you are in two situations and your priorities are here and someone else's priorities are there, the longer you're together, the further apart you're going to get, not the closer together. And that changed everything about it. Here's what I want. That's why I want you to say, I will seek the one while I'm preparing to seek the two. But I'm going to say this, this goes even further. It says, and this is a quote from Andy Stanley I thought was great. Become the person you are looking for is looking for. Become the person you are looking for is looking for. You become the person that follows hard after Christ, that follows Jesus, that loves God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. That's what you want in your spouse. Then you become that person. You set your priorities in order. That's the first thing. Married people, here's a vow for you. I promise that God will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. Now say that with me. I promise that God will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. Now, one of the things about marriage is, they talk about that 50% of marriages end in divorce, whether that's credible or not. One of the things that people like to say, well, that's the same as in the church. And sadly enough, of those who attend church, that they've found studies that they feel like, I don't know whether they're credible or not, but they found studies that they feel like those are relatively the same. But here's the thing, that's not telling you that it makes no difference if Jesus is in your life. It's telling you that if you just show up for a meeting once a week, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference in how you do stuff. It won't. It won't make a difference in your marriage. What you find out is there's a guy, his name was Bradford Wilcox, and he's a part of the American Marriage Project. He's head of that. He did studies and found that, look, people who follow Jesus, not just go to church, but people who read their Bible daily, who live their life by the principles that they find, who serve and are plugged in to a body of believers, not just go into a meeting, but they do life with people, and they make their decisions and put Jesus first. Those are 35% less likely to get divorced than people who have no religious preference at all. There's a lady named Shanti Feldhahn, and she wrote a book called The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages. And she found that the majority of very happy couples agree with this statement: God is at the center of our marriage, compared with only 7% of couples that are struggling would agree with that. A significant percentage of struggling couples would disagree in her studies with the statement that God is at the center of my marriage. Here's a great quote from her from that book I think is awesome. It says, highly happy couples tend to put God at the center of their marriage and focus on Him rather than on their marriage or spouse for fulfillment and happiness. Here's what I'm going to tell you about that. If you take what was meant to be your two and you put it in the number one spot, you're going to start to expect number one things from what you put in that number one spot. You're going to start to expect things like self-worth, fulfillment, happiness, joy, self-worth, identity. You're going to expect, and when you put a human in that number one spot, they can't fulfill that. That's not going to work. You're going to put a weight on that marriage that you're going to put them in a spot that only God was meant to fulfill. God is the only person. He is wholly separate in a class by himself. He is the only one capable of providing the number one level things that should be the number one priority in your life. He's the only one that can give you identity. He's the only one that can fulfill and back up the word, come out with self-worth and joy and fulfillment and all these type of things. God is the only one that can do that. And when you put that on someone who is your spouse, you're putting a weight on them that they can't bear. And here's some of the things that happens with that. I know when Katie and I got married, you may have heard me share this before. The guy that married us, Gary Miller, Lord love you if you're listening right now. Gary, I'm telling on you, but I love you. You know this. Gary's a great Bible teacher and everything, but man, he was not that hot at marriage counseling. I'm going to say that and then contradict myself. We met with him twice. He said the same thing both times and handed us a book. I mean, that's kind of how it went. I don't even know if you remember what he said the first time, but I'm going to tell you the thing that he said, I remembered. He said, look, the very thing that draws you to your spouse, those characteristics that you think are awesome, there's a flip side of that coin, and that will be the very thing that drive you nuts about her as well. And about your spouse. And you think about it, oh, he's so laid back. He's so creative. He's spontaneous. He's a romantic. Oh, God, I just love him. And you get married and it's like, man, what a lazy bum. He won't mow the yard. For Pete's sake, send the bill off. When are you supposed to be at work and not? You don't tell me that you're going out and doing this stuff. Why didn't you tell me this? And he's there. It's like, she's so directed. She's so awesome. She's a leader. She's decisive. She makes decisions. You get married, and it's like, will she just leave me the heck alone? Oh, my God, she's driving me crazy. I just can't. I feel so constricted. Please stop. I can't live by your rules. You might feel that. It's the very thing that we'll do is what you do. And when you put them in the first spot, here's what you'll do. You will idolize them, and then when that hits, you will demonize them. You will idolize them, and then you will demonize them. And you will put that marriage in a place that it can't survive. When you expect number one level things from your spouse, you begin to despise the things about them that you used to love because they're not producing what you feel like they should be producing. And all that cute stuff gets really annoying very, very fast. And you have to be careful about that. Here's what's going to happen. If you put your spouse in the number one spot, you're going to expect number one level things from them. They don't deliver. They will resent it because they can't win. They can never win with you. They'll resent it. The other thing is you won't receive what you're looking for. The truth is at this level of what we're talking about in priority, we're talking about really a problem with idolatry. We're trying to put somebody in the level of place that what God should be in someone's life. And here's what Isaiah said about idolatry. He said, look, gather yourselves and come. Draw near together, you fugitives of the nations. Listen, they have no knowledge who carry around their wooden idol and pray to a God who cannot save. In other words, what he's talking about back then, they would make little wooden idols and carry it around and pray to it. Oh, little wooden doll, fix my life. And that sounds dumb, but phone, fix my life. Whatever it's going to be. You pray, oh, table, please fix my life. The table can't do jack. Neither could the little doll. And that looks so stupid. He said they have no knowledge that they're praying to a God who cannot save. And when you put your spouse in a level one position and you start saying, I expect level one stuff from you because I'm pouring level one resource into you, and you're praying to a God who cannot save. And it's not going to end well. The other thing is you will both regret it. You will both regret it. In Matthew 7, Jesus talks about the wise builder and the foolish builder. And what the foolish builder builds, what it's built on really is misshapen priorities. It's not built on the foundation of God as number one. It's built on what I want as number one, and let's plug God into the side maybe if he seems to work, and it fails and crumbles. In 1 John 5, this is a really important verse. It talks about idolatry. It says, and we know that the Son of God has come, and he has given us understanding so that we can know the true God. Jesus has come so we can know God. We can replug back in. We can get to where we need to be. And now we live in fellowship with the true God because we live in fellowship with his Son. Not because we have a spouse, not because we have a job, not because we have awesome money, not because we're witty and smart, not because we're in shape and can do whatever, but because we live in fellowship with his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the only true God. He is eternal life. He doesn't lead you to it. He is it. And then in verse 21 it says this. Dear children, keep away from anything that might take God's place in your hearts. The warning is not to put something in God's place that doesn't belong there. It's not to say, oh, well, I really might like a spouse, and she may challenge God, so I got to run away. That's not what God's saying there. That's not what the writer of John is saying. What he's saying there is, look, you have to be careful that nothing gets in God's priority position in your life because it will not work because all the promises of 20 don't work with somebody else on the throne other than God. And I'm going to tell you something about marriages. It said, look, what destroys marriages isn't always bad things. It's usually good things that are prioritized incorrectly. What destroys marriages are usually not bad things, but good things that are in the improper, that are prioritized incorrectly. Work. if I decide that I'm going to go to work and I'm going to work, the Bible says I'm supposed to work hard. Work as God and, working as the Lord, not the men. If anyone who doesn't want to work shouldn't eat, I got to work, I got to do, that's important. Got a job, God put it in front of me. I'm going to honor God, and all this stuff. But if that becomes out of whack and I put that work over my spouse, I will lose my marriage. And we see it all the time. All the time. I'm going to tell you something else. Children. And somebody might not like this, but I'm going to tell you this anyway. Just in case. I tell y'all every week, I'm going to tick you off at some point. It's coming. So if this is today, I love you. But I'm going to do it anyway. Children. Your children can't be the most important person or thing in your household. Your spouse should be. Your spouse should be. The greatest gift that you can give your children is not to be at every T-ball game and everything in the world and give them every opportunity and launch them out in a flourishing explosion at 18 to where they become the greatest person that ever lived and lead the free world to, massive great existence. The greatest thing that you can give them is the best marriage that you can possibly have. Now, when you start thinking about that, it should change the way that you're dealing, with your children. Our children need to know that there's a relationship that is greater than all, and that's God. And then there's a relationship that's greater than everything else, and that's our spouse, their mom, or whoever is your spouse. That is it. That needs to be the number one thing. Because here's the thing: children are designed to be a temporary assignment. Do you get that? They're supposed to have them for 21 years and kick them out. If they're millennial, they boomerang back to you, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know. They may come back. It's all right, not try. It's alienated all the millennials in the room. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. All right? But here's the thing. Children are supposed to be a temporary assignment while marriage is designed to be a permanent assignment. Now, I know that doesn't work out for all of us all the time, but that's the way it's designed to be. Till death do you part. Many times the problem in marriage, and here's the thing: if you don't treat it that way, if you don't treat it like children are the temporary and the main thing is the marriage, you will look at your spouse in 21 years and go, "Who the devil are you? I don't know you. And why did I marry you?" And you may have to figure it out all again. And if you think I'm crazy, let me tell you this. This is a Pew Research poll not too many years ago. Divorces over the age of 50 since the 1990s have doubled. Divorces over the age of 65 since the 1990s have tripled. And these are people who get to almost the end of the rope, and they go, "You know what? I have no idea who you are." And if you live your life like your children are the most important thing that ever lived, and you don't make time for your spouse, you're going to find yourself in a tough position in a few years, and you may be having to make up for lost time. Many times, the problem with marriage comes down to a question of priority, not compatibility. Because misshapen priorities are what creates problems in compatibility most of the time. I told you, we talked about it a few weeks ago. We talked about walking in the Spirit, by the Spirit, and following the Holy Spirit. And go back and listen to that sermon about 3 weeks ago if you weren't here for that. But one of the things that walking in the Spirit creates between believers is harmony. It creates harmony. And what that means, that is greater compatibility. That's a greater ability to put up with each other and with each other's weaknesses and be proud of each other's strengths and to see that. That comes from walking in the Spirit. So when you're married, the number one priority of your marriage is God. That's huge. Here's what I'm going to say. That's a reason. This is the most important single relationship that if you get married, you're going to have. That's why in Genesis 2:24 it says, "This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." That when it says leave right there, that word in Hebrew is hazab, and it means to loosen or relinquish. Up to that point, the most important relationship you have in your life is your parents. And you're supposed to let that go and cling somewhere else. That's huge. The people that have trained you, raised you, provided for you, you're supposed to loosen up on that. And this is the relationship you focus on now. They are to focus on your number two and God to be your number one in your life. Now, guys, you know this. If somebody were to I'm going to talk to the guys for a minute. If somebody were to break into your home and they have ill intent for your wife and your children, you would not let that happen without a fight. Am I right? I mean, you would turn into some kind of super ninja throwing salt shakers and sinks and wrenches and shampoo bottles and whatever. Man, I would just, I might look a whole lot more like Kung Fu Panda than I would Bruce Lee, but I'm going to tell you right now, if they're going to get to my family, they're going over my dead body, and they will know they've been in something when I get through. And no matter what I look like, that's going to be the something. We would do that. We would lay down our lives. We would protect our family. This is the same thing when I tell you protect your priorities, but it's a laying down of your life on a daily basis. Luke 9:23 tells us that we should pick up our cross daily to follow Jesus. You know, there's only two things that God concretely says for you to lay down your life for. That's for Christ and for your spouse. Two things. And that doesn't happen in a moment of glory when someone has guns blazing. That happens every day when you wake up in the morning, when you get home from work. What is the priority in your life? You know, you need to take time set aside to be with your spouse, to work on that relationship. That's important. You know, Bruce has got a great book called The Date Night Chef. You know, and it's like recipes that they're easy to make so that you can cook for your wife. Even us dumb guys who have no idea, what a stove is. You know, it can work through us. We should have like a discipleship group on how to do that. You know, and Bruce could be the man. But anyway, so how did this? Bruce and Valerie, they have kept this throughout their marriage. I think Katie and I, we've tried to do this throughout our marriage. We started early, and oh man, I ain't got no money, I ain't got no time. Look, when we were making like basically 3/4 of an income between the two of us. Back when we started, man, our date nights were this. We have a $25 limit on date nights. Sometimes we couldn't even spend that. A lot of our date nights were looking for the hot sign to be on at Krispy Kreme, and we would go get each a donut and share a thing of milk. And that would be our date time. But we made sure that happened because why? That's the most important relationship in my life. The most important human relationship that I have, second only to God, is my wife. And if I don't treat it that way, one day I'll look up and it won't be. And it will be unhealthy, and it won't be what we needed for it to be. And we'll be sorry about it. You got to make time. Look, lazy makes excuses. Love makes a way. Maybe you in a life group. We got life groups today. I'm going to share about some life groups here in just a couple of minutes. Get in your life group and say, look, anybody, I don't have any money for babysitting. Okay, well, I'll take your kids this week. You take my kids next week, and we'll have a date night, one way or the other. You figure out how to get it done. It may have to be creative, but you know what? It's important. Here's the vows, the two, this right here. I will seek God, the one, while I prepare for the two. And two, I promise God will be my first priority, and my spouse will be the second. Next week, we're talking about the vow of pursuit. Pray with me, please.
Thanks for being a part of Bay West today. Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. Please feel free to check us out at baywestchurch.org. Or you can follow us on Facebook at Bay West Church.